Okay. Chipotle?
Chipotle!
Yeah!
Chipotle Lopale. All right.
I think a lot of guys, like myself, feel a bit like Valentine's Day is this corporate-y thing.
Uh-huh.
We're like, why do I have to buy into this?
Mhm.
I give my wife stuff all the time.
Okay.
Right,
well,
guys?
that's good. That's important because your wife deserves it.
When did we all agree?
Actually, we all agreed in 1382
1382.
is the earliest I could find of a connection between romantic love and the Feast of St. Valentine's on February 14th. Well, actually, 3 St. Valentines, you celebrate their feast on St. Valentine's Day, February 14th of the Gregorian calendar.
Hold on. There's more than one Saint Valentine?
Yeah, there's 3 for the February 14th, and I think there's like a dozen overall. There's 2 whose stories are kind of hybridized into this one, Saint Valentine, the legend of Saint Valentine, where he married the Roman soldiers. Excuse me, and then cured the blindness of his jailer's daughter, and kind of started the idea of like the Valentine's Day and the Feast of Saint Valentine's because he was kind of really important or more important. I don't know. It's unclear. And these 2 Saint Valentines, their stories are kind of blended together to form that legend of Saint Valentine.
Okay, so that's Saint Valentine, the person. Where did we get Cupid from?
Well, Cupid is a Roman god based on a Greek god, Eros, E-R-O-S. So like that concept of this god of love, and then I did actually do some research to make sure I knew what was going on with the different types of love, and there are 4 different words in Greek that translate loosely into the English word love. There was, and you've heard of these, agape, philia, storge, and eros. So agape was the highest form. That's the love that God has for man and that man has for God. That's like considered the highest form of love.
That's a good word.
It is a good word.
Agape?
Agape, A-G-A-P-E. There's philia, which is brotherly love. That's where we get filial. Storge, which is familial love. So the love you have for your family. And then eros, which is romantic or sexual love. Which they didn't really have like a... there wasn't really a delineation between like the romantic feeling you have for your significant other and just wanting to have sex with them, because back then we didn't really have a concept that like sex is bad with the kind of puritanical undertones that Americans have today. So romantic, erotic love, those are the same concepts in ancient Greek, eros. And then also the eros is the name of that god of love. And then Romans got Cupid, and then they also sort of start doing that thing with the you'd be struck by an arrow.
That was my next question.
Okay.
Yeah, where's the whole arrow thing?
Yeah, so Cupid had his bow and arrow, and you were struck by love, and that was based on the philosophy of eros, which was that you were struck, by this love or this lust for someone, that you wanted to embrace them, you wanted to be with them, you wanted to become more intimate with them. So that's where you get the shooting arrows and the little baby Cupid flying around, being a general nuisance. I think that
just an interpretation.
Yeah, I mean, in the same way that like Santa Claus we know today as a big fat jolly man in a big red suit, that came from Coca-Cola's advertising imagery in the 1940s. We also got the cherub. The concept of a cherub is, I think, I didn't find this out, but I think it is independent of Cupid. The idea of a little baby kind of flying around with his diaper and little wings. And then at some point somebody said, you know what, I'm going to move this pagan figure into the much more Christ-like little innocent baby doing little innocent baby things of making other babies
like shooting people with arrows?
Yeah, like shooting people with arrows.
At first, obviously, it was these feasts.
Yeah, just kind of standard saint feast. You have a lot of them.
When did it start to turn into this thing associated with like sweets or a romantic evening alone or things like that? Like, where did that come from? When did that start?
That, if you want to talk about like really the contemporary concept of Valentine's Day, like where you're buying the chocolates, you're buying the flowers, you're writing the poetry, is even kind of outdated now, because who can write poetry anymore?
Roses are red.
Yeah. See,
Violets are
like
blue.
that's actually important because
I am the walrus.
Yeah.
Cuckoo, cuckoo.
Really, it was the Beatles who are the last good poets. Although Bob Dylan did get, he is poet laureate, so there's something to be said for his work too.
Good job, Bob.
Yeah, good job, Bob.
I always say.
So yeah, that idea of like you give gifts of chocolate and flowers and specifically roses, and poetry started in Victorian era. And that comes from the Victorian concept of the language of flowers, where each flower represents something. Lilies, white lilies are, at a funeral, as a sign of remembrance. And then roses, the red is more the important thing, that, red, the color of love. Roses are just popular, and they come in a really good red. And the 12 comes from numerology, where 12 is like a sign of completeness, or of just kind of an important number. And they cite like the 12 months, the 12 hours of the day, the 12 signs of the zodiac as other instances in which, especially Western culture, really dwells on the number 12 in the same way that we dwell on 7 and 4.
Don't dwell on 12.
Don't dwell on 12. Did I put a W in there that didn't belong? All right, so that's the flowers thing. The 12 roses, they symbolize, I love you 12 months of the year. That's kind of like what it's saying in the language of flowers.
Wait. So the flowers, if you give your loved one or your potential loved one a single flower, you're just saying,
just 1 month.
In effect, I just love you this one time.
Yeah.
This 1 month.
Or you're cheap, or you can't afford 12. Like a dozen roses is like, you can get them 13 or 11. I don't know. The 12 is the symbolism of like completeness. But yeah, if you got them one rose, like you're saying, I love you 1 month of the year, or 1 hour of the day, or I don't know.
One lifetime.
One lifetime. Okay, that's a great way to really explain why you're being cheap on Valentine's Day.
You can have that one for free.
You heard it here first, folks.
So flash forward to Victorian era.
So the first thing, before flowers, before chocolate, you had poetry, and that comes back from Chaucer. Chaucer's era of the idea of courtly love, which is the love that a knight or a member of royalty has for somebody they're not going to marry. Or actually, this is totally original and maybe totally untrue, but so there's Chaucer's concept of courtly love, which is where we first get the association of Valentine's Day with romance and with love. Before that, it's just a feast celebrating a guy who did some cool stuff. And then we flash forward 200 years after Shakespeare to the Victorian era, and at this point, Valentine's Day is celebrated specifically with sending poems to your significant other, your wanting to be significant other. Poetry is where we start with the modern, contemporary concept of Valentine's Day. You give a gift to somebody you love. And then we get the idea of the roses are red, violets are blue. That sort of idea of getting a card with a pre-made Valentine's Day poem comes from the Victorian era, when a book was published that had a series of poems that you could send to somebody if you weren't a good poet, and that was called The Young Man's Valentine Rider, published in 1797.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a bunch of cheapskates.
Yeah, well, not everybody's a good poet.
It's true.
Let me tell you,
we can't all be Shakespeare.
We can't all be Shakespeare. Whew. But the idea of sending someone a card comes about with the beginning of the postal service around the same time, and also the cheapening of being able to send somebody a postcard. It went down to like a penny or something during this time, and the number of sent Valentine's cards skyrocketed. And
finish.
The original Valentine's Day cards were called mechanical Valentines because they were made mechanically, and they were also like a pre-made poem, like the 1797 book, the Young Man's Valentine's Rider.
how did we get from that to this like massive corporate machine that we know today?
I mean, I think that's really just a
natural evolution.
I don't want to say natural, but it is a capitalist evolution. The sending of Valentine's Day cards, you have to remember, as an American, is really tied to the United States. Like our understanding of Valentine's Day is tied to the United States and the American culture of how we do things. And most of our major holidays, which most of them are pretty Christian, or at least related to so like Christmas, Easter, Valentine's Day is technically a Catholic holiday, and then you have like Thanksgiving, and all of these holidays include some sort of form of buying. I mean, Thanksgiving, you gotta have a turkey, you gotta have a feast. You're not, unless you're a farmer, you have to buy that equipment or those consumables. Each one of these things is major for businesses because it gives them a boost to the revenue. It gives them an opportunity to provide specific advertising.
So like giving candies and giving chocolates and things like that, was that like really heavily advertised, and then that's now become the standard that everybody's adopted?
I think you could say that, and I think that the idea of we have adopted a certain view of Valentine's Day is, I don't know, it's a weird way to put the way that we treat it as a culture. Our culture is inherently capitalistic. We base a lot of our values on its
gaining
dollar
material
amount.
Wealth.
Yeah, gaining material wealth. Like we say, like, this person has made a lot of money, therefore they must be good. You know, there's sort of this goodness associated with becoming rich, with the American dream. So to say that Valentine's Day is especially consumerist, more so than any other part of traditional American culture, is, I would say, incorrect. I think it's totally baseless, and I think it's just one more example of how our society is incredibly capitalistic, and I don't want to assign that to either be a good or a bad in a sort of a value judgment.
Sure.
It's just like, we're capitalists. We base our values on money and being able to trade that for goods and services. But the idea of like a consumerist holiday is totally valid. Most of our holidays are based around consumerism, and holidays that aren't Christian, that haven't been with the mainstream American culture, don't have that same level of capitalist, or at least advertising based intent. I mean, you don't have this sort of level of consumerist hubbub around like Holi or Ramadan or even Hanukkah, which is, Jews have been here for a while. They're a big part of American culture. Why don't we have like the same level of advertising campaigns based around Hanukkah, and getting people 12 gifts, like here's a 12 gift set. I do want to say, since there is this kind of trifecta of the things you do on Valentine's Day, we've got the poetry, that's a little bit old-fashioned now. We got the flowers,
still very contemporary and in.
It's super in. What's the third thing?
Third thing is chocolates.
Third thing is chocolates. Also started in Victorian England with Richard Cadbury, the maker of the Cadbury egg. And in the same Victorian time period, you also see the dramatic drop in the price of sugar. For most of Western history, sugar, sweets, fruit, extraordinarily expensive. These were not things that normal people would ever have a chance to taste. But with Victorian era England, you have much more of a consumer market. You have much more of a supply of sugar, and cheap sugar, and then you also have the start of like chocolate as in general. And Cadbury refined a lot of the methods from making chocolate a really bitter South American import into the kind of eating chocolate that we know today, the sweet chocolate. Product that he made that started chocolates, or that is credited for starting the distribution of chocolates on Valentine's Day, is the heart-shaped box.
Oh, nailed it.
Nailed it. I mean, like, that's where we get it from. That's where the heart-shaped box come from. You have it full of chocolates, and then when it's empty of chocolates, then you have this very nice decorative box.
So for those guys like me who are pained The idea that we're buying into something that we don't necessarily want to buy into. Because for me, I'm not really religious. I'm not Christian. I'm not anything really, and I'm also not into capitalism.
Capitalism?
No, capitalism.
Okay.
So for me, it's like, do I really have to participate in this thing called Valentine's Day?
I think that's a question between you and your significant other. I mean, if you should be able to sit down with this person, say, I don't like this holiday. These are my reasons. Are you willing to forego celebrating this with me?
Like the moral of the film High Fidelity. When you really love somebody, you do the things that make them happy, not the things that you want to make them happy.
That is a really good moral. I haven't seen that movie. That was with Brendan Fraser, right?
No. John Cusack.
Oh, my bad.
So, for those guys, even if you hate the idea of Valentine's Day, if your significant other likes it or would like to be a part of it, or you know they would be delighted to receive something or to be celebrated in that way, then it shouldn't matter if you feel a bit about it. Just do it for them.
Do it for them. Do it for the nookie.
Hashtag Truth Quake, episode 1. Do it for the nookie.